The Identity Podcast is your bi-weekly foray into the weird, wonky, and sometimes downright spooky. Join host Janine Mercer as she leads you down the twisted pathways of history and tackles tales of the paranormal, weird historical people and practices, and so much more. The Identity Podcast, a proud member of the Podmoth Media Network, can be found on Twitter and Instagram at IdentityPod, and is available wherever you binge your podcasts.
Find other great podcasts like this one at podmoth.network.
The following podcast discusses adult situations and gets very sweary. Sensitive ears beware. You're listening to the Fuck My Work Life podcast, where the work stories are real, the laughs are contagious, and all of us can agree that work sucks.
Hey there, fuckers. It's Kay. And in lieu of a normal episode this week, we are bringing you another Patreon special. And this is the episode recap of the Apple TV show Severance, episode 3. Keep in mind, this is a recap, so there are definitely spoilers. And you should just hop on over to Apple TV and watch the series. It's creepy, sci-fi, based around work, but there's still there's way more to it. So definitely watch the series. I heard season 2 is in the works, but just follow along for episode 3 and we'll be back with regular episodes, hopefully next week. Bye, fuckers.
Okay, welcome back, guys, to the Severance recap. We are now on episode 3.
Yes.
And I'm going to start us off if Kay doesn't have anything to add.
What's the name of the episode?
I have no idea. Oh, Perpetuity.
In Perpetuity
In
or
Perpetuity.
something like that.
Yes.
And just for funsies, perpetuity means either a bond or security with no fixed maturity date. I feel like that's like stock related. Or a restriction making an estate inalienable perpetually for a period beyond certain limits fixed by law. Whatever the fuck that means.
Whatever the fuck that means.
Let's see what a perpetuity synonym is. Oh, forever. Permanently. So
There you go.
severance is permanent.
Yep. Unfortunately, I forgot to write the very first part when Mark is at the door. So the scene opens. This is before the opening credits. So I just started after the opening credits.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay screwed up.
Which is the first episode that actually has an opening credit sequence.
Yeah.
Which is all weird. And it's like
it's very
Mark,
cartoony.
Yeah, Mark lookalike doing all these weird things. And then that weird black tar that Irv dreamt about kind of makes its way into the open, which I'm wondering how that's going to play a part at some point.
It's not even cartoony. It's more of like what is that, claymation. It's kind of like claymation type stuff. So it opens with Mark standing at the bathroom door down in the basement. He's asking Petey if he's okay. And Petey's on the other side of the door, and he tells Mark through the door that he's fine. He just has a headache. Then it jumps to Petey on the inside of the door, and he's looking in the mirror, and he's having one of his headache fits. And he looks up in the mirror, and it clicks to him in the Lumen bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And
Irv walks by,
and they start talking about taking a trip to...
Now having an inter-department shindig.
Yeah, having like a little shindig, but I forget where he said he tried.
He asked Cobell
to go to like Sunset Park, I think.
Yeah.
And Irv goes into the bathroom stall, and Petey walks out of the bathroom. Mark is there, and then it kind of morphs back into... They're bullshitting about this, and he's saying how he asked Miss Cobell, and she said you could get it when you deserve it, this trip to Sunset Park.
Mm-hmm.
And then it clicks back to Mark standing in front of Petey in the basement asking if he's okay.
Yeah, it sounds like he's been reliving this conversation and saying it out loud because Mark's like, what is Sunset Park or whatever? Yeah, he's kind of just, his mind is in both worlds.
Yeah, he's severed.
Or reintegrated.
So then it goes through the opening credits in the new opening scene. The episode opens with Miss Cobell opening her fridge and looking in it, grabbing a carton of milk and pouring herself a glass at her counter. And the look of her counter, I first thought she was a hoarder because it was in like major disarray. Like, you know, there was shit in her fridge that was just...
Yeah, she's not a tidy person.
No, she's not very tidy. She pours herself a glass of milk and grabs a whole tray of cookies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, her chamomile cookies, which I don't
know. These looked kind of dark. These look like chocolate cookies.
Yeah,
something.
They could have been something different, but I still have a problem with chamomile cookies. I feel like you would dip regular cookies in chamomile tea, but to make chamomile cookies,
I don't know. They just be good, like a shortbread tea flavored cookie. It's something the British would probably eat.
Yeah,
it's weird though because we'll talk about it later. Go on.
So she grabs a tray of cookies and sits at her dining table. I'm guessing it's her dining table. She's looking out her window into one of Mark's windows. And it's the window that shows the door down to the basement. And then the scene jumps to Petey in the basement, explaining to Mark what getting unsevered is like, or reintegrated. It's like having two different lives stitched together, but the relativity is fucked. So my first day at Lumen, as far back as my 5th birthday, and with 2 past, it blurs to present too. So I don't know if anyone can decipher what the fuck that meant.
So he's saying there's no like linear time to his memories. So, you know, you can look back and be like, oh, when I was 30, this, oh, back when I was 5, and you realize there's like a linear kind of to it where he's saying like all his memories are so he felt like he was 5 yesterday and he felt like he was at Lumen yesterday, and now he basically has two pasts because he's been severed, so he's got kind of this work past and this life past, but they're all like
they're all
at the same time
just mashing together now. Of course, Mark is looking at him just as confused as I was when he said it. Petey continues to say, they said it would get better. Mark condescendingly asks, who's they?
Yeah, he like cocks his head like a dog. Who's they?
Who's they? They is a group of people who know Severance is a blight on mankind, and they're going to do something about it. And then Mark says, the whole Mind Collective? Petey says, the kids strolling for signatures downtown? No, not the fucking WNC. Someone else. Right, well, so what do you want from me? Mark asks. Don't you want to know what you're doing down there? Mark tilts his head in a way that we know means no and says, look, I'm not going to unsever. Petey answers him saying, well, I don't want you to unsever because that's not a word. Reintegration.
Yeah.
So he kind of, you know,
semantics.
It's basically semantics, almost like 15-year-old semantics. Yeah. So Mark just says, whatever, and continues to explain that it hasn't been a blight for him and that it's helping. Peter says, okay, well, what if the cost of that help is you're murdering people for 8 hours a day and you don't even know it? Mark says, well, am I? Petey changes subject and says that he's found a department where you don't ever get to leave. And Mark asks, isn't that basically what we do? Petey tells him no, a department where they are down there working right now as we sit here speaking, and they never leave that department. And then again, Mark replies, what, like chained up or?
Yeah.
So Petey immediately gets a look of concern on his face and makes the shush gesture, you know, the one,
like he kind of
one finger over his mouth and starts saying that they could have the monitors bugged or if Irving is going to walk in. He's obviously hallucinating since they are sitting in Mark's basement. Petey is looking around in confusion, and so is Mark. Mark tells him they are not at Lumen, and Petey says, well, where the fuck is June? And then starts grabbing his head like he's having a bad headache. Again, he has these a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's almost constant.
He apologizes to Mark, and there's an awkward silence before Mark asks, "Who's June?" Petey says, "June is my daughter, greatest kid on earth, and a hell of a guitar player." Another silence as Mark looks at Petey with a sort of pity, and Petey asks him, "How happy are you that you asked me to stay here?" Which is, at this point, I wouldn't even know how to answer that.
Yeah.
You know, like when you think about the whole premise of this show, it's kind of crazy to think you could go to work and your outside life you would know nothing about.
Yeah.
And I think the appealing part is going to work and your work life when you're outside of work, you don't ever take work home with you.
Right. I mean, it's probably different for everyone. Like for Mark, he's trying to forget his personal life. But a lot of people, probably opt to do this because they don't want to think about work when they're not there.
Yeah.
But he's kind of the opposite.
He doesn't want to think about his outside life while he's at work. So Petey asks him, "How happy are you that you asked me to stay here?" And Mark just gives him a little smile. And then the scene jumps to the view from Miss Cobell's window, looking at Mark come out of the basement door, grab his drink, sit on the couch, and click the TV on. And, just speaking to herself, she says, "Oh, Mark, are you all right?" We were talking about it when we were watching it. Like, she's so different outside of work than she is inside of work.
Yeah, she's cold, no emotions, very put together. Here, she's got her hair in 2 braids and it's all like disheveled and her apartment's a mess. But we don't know if she is severed or not.
Yeah, we don't know at this point. She seems like she actually gives a shit when she's outside of work.
Yeah, I mean, she's got some sort of obsession with Mark.
So it jumps to Mark on the couch watching the news, and they're going on about severed controversy in the background. You can hear an anchor ask someone else, "Well, what do you say, Natalie, to a woman who became pregnant at work less than a month after her company became severed?" And then she's like, "Well, first I suggest she reveal her identity if she wants to have an honest conversation about that period."
Yeah.
And also end up like Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Well, how could she have that conversation when her workie was the one involved in the conception? And they just go into typical like media panel banter back and forth. And Mark, you can tell he's kind of over it. You know, he's just like, ugh, and clicks the channel and starts clicking through channels. And then it jumps to him waking up the next morning with the same drink next to him, the sun in his face, and he's obviously hungover and has to get up and go to work.
Yeah.
He walks down to the basement stairs and tries to wake Petey up. Petey stirs and says, "Hey." Mark tells him it's morning and he's in his basement just to kind of get his bearings, I guess, like kind of help him get his bearings. Then he tells him he's going to work and he is more than welcome to stay, and also reiterate that he is not going to reintegrate.
Mm-hmm.
Mark tells him he lost his wife a couple years ago in a car accident and that it's helping him being severed while he's at work. Petey apologizes and Mark shrugs it off, telling him, no, it's okay. As Mark starts to walk away, Petey stops him and tells him that sometimes he would come in with red eyes, and they had a joke that he had an elevator allergy and that there was even a song. Petey then tells him that he wonders if he carries that hurt down there and just doesn't know what it is.
Yeah. And you can see it on his face sometimes, even when he's in the office world.
Mark just kind of shrugs it off and walks up the stairs and tells him to grab whatever he wants up in the fridge and leaves. As Mark goes out his door and gets to his car, it's Miss Cobell, but it's her name outside is Selvig. Miss Selvig is leaning outside of her front door with a blow drying off her stoop.
Yeah, de-icing her stoop.
Yeah. She apologizes for the racket and explains she's de-icing her stoop. Like anyone who sees that wants to know, he thanks her again for the cookies, and she says she'll bring more by. He gets in his car and leaves, and she turns her blow dryer off, because
It's just a ruse
she's got some nefarious shit going on in her head.
Yeah.
And the scene jumps to Mark doing the severed ritual of putting all his things in his locker before he goes into the elevator. When he gets up to his floor, or down to his floor, I guess, he grabs his daily activities out of the thing, and it's all the new pictures with Helly in the pictures. And as he's looking at the photos, Helly comes up next to him and says, "Oh, I did a thing yesterday and filed the scary numbers." And Mark was like, "You did?" And she was like, "Yeah, while you weren't here."
Yeah. And he didn't realize he wasn't there.
Yeah, he didn't realize he wasn't there. And turns around, and Irving is walking in and tell him that Dylan took over training in his stead, and it went off good. I guess Dylan did a good job.
Mm-hmm. All while talking about waffle parties.
And all his manly caricatures.
Yeah.
As Irving's telling him this, he stops him and he goes, "Oh, you're looking mighty trim. I wonder if it was food poisoning that you had." Dylan welcomes him back, and as Mark walks up to Helly's desk, she says he may as well skip her, skip putting the picture on her desk, because she put in her resignation request. And Mark is like, "You did." She then says it's good, so he won't get sent to the break room anymore. He's about to respond back to her, and Mr. Milchick walks in and greets all the refiners. "Hello, refiners." Everything with this show is so weird.
Yeah.
And I think it's supposed to be, but it's so fucking weird. Like, almost to the point where, like, everyone outside of the four that are working there, like Miss Cobell and, well, I guess there's only two.
Mm-hmm.
But Miss Cobell and Mr. Milchick, they just seem so fake.
Yeah.
When they're there. So Mr. Milchick basically asks Mark if he's ready for his first day of the announcement giver, his first day as the announcement giver. And is he ready to give the announcements? Mark is kind of not really caught off guard, but he's kind of awkward.
Yeah.
And so he starts reading the announcements. And when he begins, Milchick is like running around the room with this,
the same camera he was taking pictures of
like
Helly when she was getting her severance
camera.
Yeah, very strange.
And before he starts giving the announcement, he kind of cracks a joke to Irving that maybe it'll be easier, with me not in the crowd. Irving turns to Helly and lets her know that, he whispers like Mark used to mess with Petey giving announcements by having gas having.
Yeah.
So he used to fart.
Yeah.
So Mark starts giving the announcements, and Dylan chimes in like, "Why are you standing funny? Like, stand normal." And Mark's like, I'm standing great. And Helly chimes in, "Oh, would you be more comfortable if we all looked away?"
Yeah, they're all just fucking with him.
Yeah, they're just kind of messing with him. And he continues with the announcement and says there's been some garbage in the recycling bin, and please don't do that. And Post-it notes are not to be put on faces. They can clog your Audi's pores.
Okay.
Dylan claims that one's about him because he had a beloved character, Mr. Stickyhead, and then Mark continues with, "Please refrain from boasting about previously earned waffle parties." And that's when Dylan is like, "Oh, I'm kind of feeling attacked."
Yeah. Seems like they had a lot more fun when Petey was in charge.
Yeah. The last announcement, you can see Mark reads it on the paper and is kind of unsure. And he looks to Mr. Milchick and says he's never seen a resignation request get such a quick turnaround. Helly immediately stands up and asks joyfully if she has to finish out the day or if she can just skip out now. Mark continues looking at Mr. Milchick, and they're both kind of, it's very awkward the way they're looking at each other.
Yeah. Well, Middle Dick is just like, say the fucking words. It's your job now.
And he's like, "Lastly, Helly's resignation request was denied." Helly says it can't be right. Her Audi would never do that to her. Mark starts to talk to her, saying Petey used to say. She scurries off to the bathroom real quick. And as she scurries off, Mr. Milchick leaves the room on his phone. So now the scene jumps to the front of Mark's house, and his sister and brother-in-law pull up.
Fucking douchey brother-in-law.
Yeah.
You can tell the sister even fucking hates him.
Yeah, she's kind of had it with him. Rickon wants to drop off his new book to Mark.
Well, we don't know what it is yet. He's putting some sort of package on his doorstep.
He's putting some sort of package on his doorstep. And he's asking, you think he'll be surprised? And she's like, yeah, sure, he'll be surprised. He goes to the door and can't figure out where the best spot to put it would be. Up against the door or off to the side.
Yeah, and she's already been like, I have to pee, so just fucking put it down and let's go. And he's
and she's pregnant.
Douchey.
She's obviously annoyed by him and all of his stupid questions. He moves it off to the side, and you can see the only thing that matters is the way his book looks, not anything else. Like, he doesn't give a shit how surprised Mark is going to be. All he gives a shit is, like, Mark is getting his book.
I think he thinks Mark is going to be like surprised and happy because he thinks the world revolves around him and gives a shit about whatever he's doing.
Yeah, so he puts it off to the side and he's like, oh, does it look good there? Yeah, sure, it looks good there. Okay, it's perfect. It's perfect. The way he says it's like, it's a fucking little package standing up against a wall.
Yeah.
So he gets back in the car and he's like, oh, he's going to be so excited. I hope he comes up early. And his wife is like, yeah, he's not going to. And they drive off. And who comes out the door? Miss Cobell, and starts to walk towards the front door of Mark's place. It then jumps to Petey in the bathrobe trying to redraw the map of Lumen on a piece of paper. It looks like he's having small headaches while he's doing it. Miss Cobell picks up the book, looks around, clicks back to Petey drawing the map, and Mark slides down the partition between their desks. So he's obviously hallucinating again.
Yeah.
Hey, what's that? Sudoku? Petey tries to hide it, saying, it's nothing. Mark asks, what are you drawing? Petey says he's drawing Mark getting back to work in cubist form. Mark replies with, whoa, how do you know what cubist form is? And what the fuck are you wearing? And then slides the partition back up, and Petey sees himself at his desk in his bathrobe and like flings the phone because he's in the basement.
Yeah.
And then Miss Cobell puts the key in the door and he hears that. He goes and hides and she comes into Mark's place.
Well, now we know she's not severed.
Yeah, now we know she's not severed.
Yeah. So Miss Selvig is just a persona and she has a key to Mark's place.
So she's snooping around upstairs and then decides to go down in the basement. I'm guessing because she's seen him down in the basement for the past couple days. And she goes down in the basement and she starts looking through the same plastic bin that Mark looked through that had the candle that his wife made.
Yeah, or some of her supplies or something.
Yeah, it was her craft.
Yeah.
It was her craft supplies. And there was a candle in there and she like picks up the candle, sniffs it, and then sticks it in her purse.
It was weird. I wonder if she somehow knew Mark's wife.
Yeah, I know. There's so many ways this show can go.
Yeah.
So Petey's hiding and she comes down into the basement and he's watching her. Then her phone starts to ring. She answers it and she kind of walks into, I think, the bathroom.
Yeah.
Down in the basement. And she's pacing back and forth in the bathroom talking on her phone. And Petey is having flashbacks of her at work.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like going back and forth to her at work and her in the bathroom down there. He just like comes out of hiding, drops his blanket, runs up the stairs and is out of there.
Yeah.
And then it clicks to her on the phone saying, did you give her directed praise? So she's talking to Milchick.
Yeah.
Or Middle Dick.
Yeah.
She's talking to Middle Dick on the phone. She goes up and out and gets in her car and tells him she'll be right there and goes to work.
In her shitty little car.
What is it? A rabbit. So the scene jumps to Mark knocking on the bathroom door at Lumen, asking for Helly. She says, go away. He asks if she's okay. She says, fine. And he says, it's been like 45 minutes. She insists that she's fine and she's using the bathroom. He says it's been a while and he thinks he needs to come in. She again says she's fine while she's standing in front of the mirror, writing a note to herself on her arm. There's like this back and forth. He's like, well, I'm coming in, so do whatever you got to do because I'm on my way in. He comes in and she's got let me out written on her arms, but she wrote the top half on one arm and the bottom half on the other arm.
Yeah.
And he just lets her know that, so you wrote it on your arm. She's like, well, does this look like writing to you? And he's like, well, when you put your arms together, and lets her know that the code reader can also pick that up too. Mm-hmm. And he asks her, like, I thought you were starting to be okay here. And she answers, what, because of the numbers thing? Well, you got to win. A lot of people find joy in that. The numbers literally cause fear, she says. Well, that's just one subset of numbers. The others are more comforting. She stops him. Mark, I don't want to work here with you. So don't burst into the bathroom with your pathetic boss voice and try to convince me that I do. He gets stern and is like, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes to scrub your arms. She says, or what? He leans in close and quietly says, do you want Grainer to use the bad soap on you?
So weird.
And she almost laughs and says, there's bad soap?
Yeah, it's very weird.
Mark just looks at her and slams down the handle that turns the faucet on and points very firmly. And Ellie says, thanks, boss. The view changes to outside the bathroom when Mark is walking out and Irving is standing there nosily. He tells Mark that he was listening at the door and it's troubled him having such high stress exchanges like that, so fresh off of food poisoning. Mark tells him acclimating takes time, and Irving cuts in and says, and guidance. Dylan was going on about pencils and waffle parties yesterday as though that's why we are here. That is not why we are here. It's a deeper meaning she craves. She should see the Perpetuity wing. Mark says she can read about all that stuff in the handbook. Irving says, it's different to be there.
He's drank the fucking flavor.
Oh, yeah. And Mark tells him it just seems premature, and that place is a lot. Correct, Irving jumps in. That place is everything.
Weirdo.
Jump scene to Miss Cobell walking in the office and Milchick asking how the check went. She handed him the package and says there was a package left at the door and hands it to him and he should check it. He opens it and a picture of Rickon is on the book. The title, The You Are. Cobell reacts with, oh, God. And Middle Dick asks if that's the brother-in-law. She confirms it's Rickon and walks into her office.
It's like his 5th book or some shit.
Yeah, it's his 5th book. He flips the book open and starts reading. Chapter 12, Learning to be Emotionally Nude in Front of My Wife. Cobell says from her office, just check it for messages. As she finishes saying that, Mark walks in. Middle Dick puts the book face down on his desk, and he asks to speak to Mrs. Cobell. Middle Dick asks if he's filled out the proper request for supervisory interaction. Mark says no and looks defeated, but Miss Cobell says, to come in the office. It's fine. He walks in her office and she tells him to get the door. He closes the door and says, Irving thought we should take Helly to the Perpetuity wing this afternoon. She responds with, well, it's a good thing I made Irving a department chief. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I should take Helly and the team to the Perpetuity wing. She asks very sheepishly, have you filled out a common space reservation slip, Mark? He sighs and answers no. She looks up at him annoyed, and he continues, it has been weird since Petey left. He claims that Petey set the tone. She responds with, well, if Petey were the tone setter you're lionizing him as, he'd still be here. And Mark just looks at her and says, what does that mean? Without looking up from her desk, she's like, am I going to have to throw my mug at you, Mark? He starts to stammer, and without hesitation, she chucks her mug at him, hitting the door behind him, leaving a mark in the door, and firmly tells him to get MDR to its numbers. That's macro data refinement, for those of you who don't know. He says okay and turns to walk out. She stops him and says, what I just did was something I knew you could handle and grow from. It was very painful for me. I hope that you'll let it help you. Mark opens the door to exit her office and asks if she wants it open or closed. She kind of half looks up from her desk and says, both. The scene jumps to Dylan at his desk, exclaiming that his delts are embarrassingly good today, and that his Audi must do muscle shows.
Okay.
And Irving looks at him and says, if your Audi did muscle shows, you wouldn't have to work here. Dilling and Irving go on about how much muscle shows pay, and all the while, Helly is writing a note to herself again, but this time she is stuffing it into what looks like a Sharpie cap. Dylan and Irving continue with the ridiculous conversation about which muscles pay more, as Helly tapes the end of the cap off and breaks the clip part of the cap. She gets up and goes to the common area, pours herself a drink out of a Lumen glass,
Of course,
puts the cap in her mouth, and before she starts taking a drink, behind her is Mark, and he's like, thirsty? And she turns around with her mouth closed, is like, mm-hmm. And Mark is like, just in case it's relevant, you should know that the code readers can also detect words inside the body. She just kind of looks at him, and he's like, also, when that happens, it's Middle Dick's job to extract the message. And when he asks how long ago you ingested it, I really can't recommend honesty enough. It's easier for you both if he knows which end to start from.
Yeah.
And he holds his hand out, and she spits the cap into it with some spittle.
Yeah.
Another good try, though. Helly agrees with him. Mm-hmm. And as he walks out the common area, he stops at the partition, turns around and tells her, go shut down your workstation. We're taking a trip. And that's where my part ends.
Hey, Ann Barner.
Hey, Karen Beatty.
We need a promo. Like where we talk about what we do on our podcast.
On our Sugar-Coated Murder podcast? Like how we love to bake and talk about murder?
That's what we need to talk about.
There you go.
I think we've talked about it. Y'all find us on all your favorite listening apps.
Stay sweet.
And don't murder.
Because if you kill people,
we will talk about you.
Now, Irv, Helly, Dylan, and Mark are all walking down one of those long white hallways, and Irv is just going on and on about the histories and the founders of Lumen, and he's talking about a poem that he made up to remember all the CEOs' names, and his voice is kind of echoing in those empty hallways, and they're all kind of standing behind him, walking behind him, looking at each other, kind of just like, Jesus, did they ever shut up? And then Dylan kind of pulls out these pieces of paper and hands one to each of them. And Helly opens it up, and it's an Egan bingo card that he's made with squares like picture of children with rickets, erection used in a constructive sense, passive-aggressive shit-talking of Ambrose, and Lumen saves the world. Dylan says it's the only way to not die of boredom in the Perpetuity wing, and it's an excellent way for everyone except for Irv to bond. So they're coming to this intersection in the hallways, and they run face-to-face with Bert, Christopher Walken, and another woman. And the woman's like carrying this tray, and they're all kind of staring at each other for a minute. And then Mark says weirdly, optics and design? And Bert replies, macro data refinement? Bert asks Irv how his session was, to which he replies, very refreshing. Then they're kind of making small talk about the stupid totes again when Dylan jumps in and starts being an asshole, saying, don't you have something to do? It's weird to see you out of your hole. And the woman replies, egg drop challenge in the team building space. Tight department like us, gotta keep our synergy up. And there's kind of more banter, and they introduce Helly and then kind of go on their way. And there are these weird, like, almost flirty looks exchanged between Irv and Bert. Like, they're kind of longingly looking at each other, and it's really weird. And then Dylan calls after them, those eggs look like shit. And the woman kind of, like, turns around and gives him a dirty look.
She just, like, jerks around and gives him a dirty look.
He's such an asshole. So now we see Cobell walking into her office, where she finds the woman from the news story that Mark was watching earlier, Natalie, sitting at her desk, and the infamous intercom is being hooked up by Middle Dick. We learn that Cobell's name is Harmony.
Yes.
And then Natalie says she's there about Peter Kilmer and that the board is joining them. So Cobell and Middle Dick exchange kind of like sideways glances at each other. She sits down, and the two women just stare at each other, and you kind of hear static coming from the intercom, and Natalie's got this big fake smile on her face, and they're just looking at each other. And then finally, Natalie says, the board would like you to speak first. So Cobell says, like, salutations or something weird like that. And then there's another long silence. So she continues on. The search for Kilmer continues, and there's more awkward silence. And she says, there was some troubling evidence that Kilmer may have reintegrated before leaving Lumen. And then Natalie kind of like pauses her, and she's listening into this headset that she has on, and she's kind of listening for a few seconds. You can tell someone's talking to her. The whole time she's got this like fake fucking smile on her face. And then she says, the board is conveying pretty strongly that the severance procedure is provenly irreversible, and this knowledge should be a given to a person managing a severed floor. And while, of course, getting MDR to their projected numbers by the quarterly deadline in 3 weeks. So basically, shut up.
Yeah.
Get your numbers where they should be.
Yeah, and the weird part is like the thing that Middle Dick is setting up on her desk looks like an intercom, but it's basically just a microphone because they're talking in her ear.
Yeah, and you can't hear anything.
You can't hear anything coming out of the intercom.
Yeah. So Cobell starts to talk about how they're getting back up to speed with their new refiner, and Natalie like interrupts her and says, the board has ended the call. So Cobell tries to say something to Natalie, but she cuts her off mid-sentence. It's just, goodbye, Harmony, and then fake smiles and then leaves her office. Like, we're not even sure what the point of this fucking call was, other than just get your numbers to where they're supposed to be, even though they said the call was about Pete.
Yeah.
So,
Peter Kilmer.
Yeah. So kind of strange. So back in the hallway, they're still walking to the Perpetuity wing. Like, how fucking big are these floors? It feels like they're walking forever. And Helly is amazed that there is a 2-person department. And Dylan says it's unnatural. Cure sorted the departments by virtue. Macrodats are clever and true, and O&D is more cruelty-based. Helly asked how many departments there are, and no one really knows for sure. Like, Irv says 5, Mark says something like 30 or something. Like, nobody really knows. And then Dylan says O&D attempted a violent coup a long time ago, and that's why there's only 2 of them now. And then everyone's like, no, this is total fiction, but Helly wants to know if they killed anyone. She's got like this dark streak. She then goes on to say that if they come back to attack them, they should kill Mark, so they think we're crazy with nothing to lose. And she says, like, I'm imagining them rounding a corner and we're all blood-soaked and I'm wearing your face. And they're like, whose face is that? And I'm like, the last person who fucked with us. That seems like a really powerful image to me. and Dylan's kind of like, yeah. And Mark says, it just seems like they'd recognize my face. Maybe if you wore it inside out. They're all just kind of having like fun little banter, except for Irv. So they finally reached the Perpetuity wing, which looks like a normal-sized, boring white office door, and then it opens into this small room with this very creepy, lifelike statue.
Yeah, like Madame Tussauds kind of statue.
Like a wax figure. And Irv says, come now, children of my industry, and know the children of my blood. It's James Egan, the current CEO. The quote on the wall says, history lives in us, whether we learn it or not. So I'm wondering if that's going to be significant because they don't really have a history because they don't know anything but work down there. So they walk into the next room and it's full of all these lifelike, kind of wax figures of all the other CEOs of Lumen. And Irv informs them that the entire back portion is dedicated to Kier. So now we see Petey walking down a snowy road in his bathrobe. His nose is bleeding. He's disoriented. He's looking at that piece of the paper with the map on it. And while he's doing that, we hear the voice of Kier Egan. I know that death is near upon me because people have begun to ask what I see as my life's great achievement. They wish to know how they should remember me as I rot. In my life, I have identified 4 components, which I call tempers, from which are derived every human soul. Woe, frolic, dread, malice. Each man's character is defined by the precise ratio that resides in him. I walked into the cave of my own mind, and there I tamed them. Should you tame the tempers as I did mine, then the world shall become but your appendage. It is this great and consecrated power that I hope to pass on to all of you, my children. So, 1, Kier sounds like a fucking cult leader. Mm-hmm. And 2, I feel like this somehow is playing into what they're doing to them down there. Like wiping basically everything from them, but they still have their personality.
Yeah.
And basically trying to form them into these whatever precise ratio of these 4 things or something. That's my
some weird
prediction.
Shit.
As the speech continues, we switch back to the Perpetuity wing that's showing the names of all the CEOs, and then Helly stops at Myrtle Egan and plays the audio. I think that to be an Egan, either a true Egan or anyone working in this Lumen family, what you are is the keeper of an ethos, a compact of values that we have long held as precious, and to which I do believe will one day save this world. And that ethos goes all the way back through my blood. And Helly looks down and she marks off one of her bingo squares that talks about Lumen saving the world.
Yeah.
Irv comes up behind them and says, "It's okay if you cry," to Helly.
Yeah.
And tells them that at age 7, Myrtle said she was going to be the first female CEO, to which Helly replies, "Almost makes me wish I remembered my own childhood." And Irv kind of looks at her and says, "It's a natural state for a person to have no history. History makes us someone, gives us a context, a shape. But waking up on that table, I was shapeless. But then I learned that I work for a company that has been actively caring for mankind since 1866. Look, each of these is a real smile from someone on the outside." So now they're in this room that's just pictures of people's mouths smiling.
Teeth. Yeah.
"Someone Lumen Industries has helped, and they rotate these through. The true number of smiles may well be in the millions." And so Sally asks, like, "Are we a dental company or something?" And Irv says his point is that she's part of a history now. Then Dylan walks in and says, "They updated the mouth wall. Damn, they took down the chick I liked. Are you guys ready to go?" And like this, of course, pisses Irv off. He's upset and says, "We just got here. She hasn't even seen the cure part yet."
Yeah.
So they walk through another set of doors and it like opens into this big room, and Helly says, "Jesus." And Irv says, "No, cure."
No, cure. Yeah.
And it's a real life scale replica of Kier's house, like complete with front yard and everything.
Yeah.
And they go inside and they're in Kier's bedroom, and there's a sign on the bed that says, "Do not lie on Kier Egan's bed." Dylan says he hates this place. It smells like 19th century ass. And Irv is getting very upset that no one is taking this as seriously as him. And he goes over to scold Mark because Mark looks like he's about to go sit on the bed. And he's talking to him, and he sees like the blue piece of paper in Mark's pocket, and he pulls it out and sees the bingo card, and he's all mad, and he's like, "It's the Perpetuity wing, the living soul of Lumen and everything she stands for, not a bingo match." And Mark says, "Look, Kier said, keep a merry humor ever in your heart." And they start arguing and look up to find that Helly is gone. Mark realizes she's made a run for it and begins to chase her down the maze of white hallways. And she's fucking running for it.
Yeah.
So they're both running down the hallways, and like the shots in this are crazy because the cameraman looks like they're running too, because it's all bouncy and shaky, and they're following him around, and there's this like erratic piano music playing, and it's all very chaotic. And meanwhile, Middle Dick is like sitting in the conference room reading Rickon's book, just kind of shaking his head. And then Helly reaches an emergency exit, but it's locked. And then she runs back and finds a fire extinguisher, and she starts smashing the window out. And this, of course, sounds the alarms. Everything turns red. And she has taken the bingo card and written a note to herself that says, "Never come back." And she's trying to reach her arm out of the hole and get her head out there to switch to her Audi or whatever, so her Audi can see that sign. But before she could make that happen, and I don't think her head was going to fit through that little window, but Mark catches up with her and like pulls her through, cutting the shit out of her arm up as he pulls her back through the little window. The alarm stops, and then Grainer, is it Grainer or Granger? Grainer is standing at the end of the hall, and he just looks at him and just calmly says, "This way, please, Helly R." And she like looks back at Mark for help, like hoping Mark will be like, no, I'll go. And he's just like, "Fuck you. It's on you this time." So he says nothing. And Helly walks away with Grainer, and he leads her to the break room. And Middle Dick is in there, and he's, disappointed in her. But he dresses her wound And then she says, you seem smart. Like, you see how fucked up this is. And he's not having it. He just says, sit down. Not now. So she sits down at this table and there's like these weird handprint indentations. And he's like, put your hands on the table. So she has to lay her hands on the table. And then there's a lighted glass in front of him that the compunction statement comes up on. And he's got, you know, a tape recorder and headphones on. And he's sitting across the table from her. And, you know, he's like, read this. She's like, I don't want to. And he's like, no, do. She just looks at him.
Do.
She's like, okay. I looked up what the fuck compunction means, and it's a feeling of guilt or moral scruple that prevents or follows the doing of something bad. So basically guilt.
Yeah.
Yes.
The guilty statement.
Yeah. And it's the same one that we heard Mark recite on the tape that Petey had. And they make her repeat it multiple times. She finishes the first time and he's like, I'm afraid you don't mean it. And she's like, what? And she reads it again. And after the second time, you see Cobell's like standing in the shadows and she like shakes her head no. And Middle Dick's like, again. She starts reading it again. And each time you could tell she's getting like a little more kind of defeated and weirded out and some weird fucking brainwashing shit happening. So now we see Mark. He's clearly shaken. He's sitting at his desk, just kind of staring off to space. And Dylan is leaving for the day. And he asks Mark if he wants him to get the lights. And Mark says yes. So Dylan flips the switch. And like in this big fucking room, instead of the lights just going off at once,
They trail.
They trail like in a wave from one side of the office to the other. And it's weird. So he's kind of sitting there in the dark and he pulls out the new group photos and grabs the frames to put them in. And as he's going through each one, he opens up, I'm assuming, Petey's frame, and he finds the map that Petey has hidden. I think he mentioned him hiding one for him. And that's where it was. It was hidden in the picture frame. So now we cut to Petey and he's in like a gas station convenience store. His hand is bloody. He's stumbling around. He's breathing heavy. He's obviously like not doing well, and he's kind of feeling his way along the like refrigerator doors where all the drinks and stuff are, and he's like saying, I don't have any tokens, I can't eat without tokens. And the cashier is kind of like, oh shit, we got a crazy one in here. And now we cut back to see Mark walking down the hallway at work, and then Petey yelling, hey, I need tokens so I can eat. And then Mark entering his key card in the elevator, Petey having a headache, seizure, and falling to the floor as Mark ascends and gets back to his Audi personality. Mark gets home and discovers Petey's gone. He goes out looking for him, and he's at like an intersection, and he sees an ambulance go by, and something tells him follow it. Yeah. So he follows the ambulance to this gas station. And there's cops and ambulance, and he sees them walking Petey out, and he gets out of his car and kind of stands up, and they lock eyes briefly, and then Petey just collapses like face first onto the concrete. And Mark's kind of horrified and gets back in his car and just drives away and goes back to his basement and starts to like erase any evidence that Petey was there. He's covering up the couch he was sleeping on, putting boxes on it, just trying to make it look like he was never there. Yeah. He turns out the lights and starts heading back up the stairs, and he hears a phone start buzzing, and you just see a phone sitting on the basement floor buzzing. And then that's the end of the episode. Yeah, it's definitely getting creepy. I'm forming some theories. I have no idea if they're going to be right or not, but we were talking about it earlier, and you asked if I thought they picked Mark instead of Irv to be whatever manager because they're trying to mold him. Yeah. But I think they're just fucking with people down there.
I know. And well, it definitely seems that way. And I can totally see how you would see that they're just fucking with Irv because Irv should be the department chief, but he's not. Yeah. You know, and that's what makes me think, you know, that's why I was saying like they have a soldier in Irv. Yeah. Like, they've got him exactly where they want him. Yeah. You know, it's the other people that they need to
get in line.
Get in line. Helly, she's like me. She's just a fucking rebel.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. My theory is that no one does any real work down there. Like I was telling you earlier, like this numbers thing is, what the fuck is it? They're just putting numbers in buckets. The little we know of, optics and design, they're designing fucking tote bags and dropping eggs as a team building challenge. Like they're not doing any real actual work. This is
they're moving pictures too.
Because... That's true. Yeah. They're moving pictures from one wing to another. So it's kind of like everybody feels like their job is super important, but they're actually doing fucking nothing.
Yeah.
And I just feel it's this weird kind of social experiment that the fucking Egans started because there's all this talk of blood and children and I don't know. It's all really weird.
It's very weird. And it's weird to hear that gets started in the 1860s.
Yeah. Well, I think it was last episode when I paused on their manual that Helly was reading, and it said they started as like a topical salve company. And now they're like this weird leading bioscience something type of company, high-tech company.
Yeah, it's definitely weird.
Yeah.
And it's weird to hear that other companies, like when there was the banter on the news, that other companies are starting to sever.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're just doing it in their company, unless they fucking own everything.
Yeah,
so
that could
who
be
knows?
too. Yeah. It could be like Lumen has subsidiaries or something.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see where this all goes.
I know. I am too.
Yeah. All right, everybody. If you guys want to share your thoughts on these episodes, don't jump ahead because we don't want spoilers either. But I think we can chat in the Patreon page, or you can just text us because there's two of you.
Yeah, exactly.
But, if anyone else ever jumps on, we can have the discussion on the Patreon page. We'll try to motivate and get the next episode out faster.
Yeah, that was my fault.
It's been busy.
I was dragging my ass on.
Fucking Jay dragging his ass.
Yeah. Well,
All right, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you.
Fuckers. Thanks for listening to the Fuck My Work Life podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating us on your favorite podcast platform. We love to hear your workplace stories, so send them our way to fmwlpod@gmail.com or leave us a message at 310-818-3273. For more fun content, follow us on TikTok, Threads, and Instagram at fmwlpod. You can also chat with us and your fellow fuckers on our Discord channel. You can find all our links in the show notes. Until next time, bye, fuckers.